Last year, my stepdaughter asked me if I would turn her a bangle, and I said, "Yeah, what's a bangle?" So I'd never really seen them, and she's pretty fashion conscious, and so I Googled them and looked at it, figured out what they were, and I thought, well, yeah, I could probably do that. So I didn't Google any videos on it. I don't know if there's probably some out there, but I didn't look them up. But the first one or two that I did, I turned end grain. Big mistake. You probably won't even get them off the lathe. Because the way the grain runs, they'll pop and snap before you can ever hardly even finish one. And if you do finish one, a little bit of pressure and pop, it's gone. So you've got to turn them long grain, side grain. And so what I usually do, and the nice thing about these is they're obviously pretty small, so you can use lots of little pieces of wood that you might have left over. But I'll find different pieces of wood, and I've used some of everything from ash to walnut and cherry and apple and everything in between. But I'll find a piece of wood that I have, and I'll cut out a circle on the bandsaw that's about at least 3 1/4, maybe 3 3/8, and that size will usually fit most all the sizes of bangles that you do. So I'll rough them out on the bandsaw, and I won't spend the time to show you how to true them up, because I figure everybody here knows how to do that, so we won't waste our time doing that. But I'll make my blanks like this. A lot of times if I'm going to do a number of them, I'll cut out several. And I usually, this length is pretty good. I can get at least 2, maybe 3 out of this. You could do them a little longer, but it seemed like, I can cut a tenon on this and hold it really securely and make a couple and then grab another piece. So that seems to work pretty well. I'll pass these around, everybody can look at them. And I'll pass this piece around too. This is one I started yesterday, and I got it about this far along, and a defect showed up in there. There's a crack you can see, and I didn't want to finish that to sell it, so I thought, well, this might be good for everybody to see the steps here. So we'll pass this around, and here's a couple I've made recently. This is a piece of ash, actually another piece of this some Ash County ash, and this one has a little bit of detail in it. I did the arch and 2 flats, and then burned kind of a little accent line there with a guitar string. And this is a piece of wood the same as this, and I know everybody's going to ask me, what is it? And I don't remember. The guy at a sawmill gave it to me one day. I was talking to him, and it was a slab. I guess it grew around here, and maybe somebody will recognize it, can tell me what it is. But I've had it for decades. And
looks like it might be the sapwood of a walnut tree.
No, it's definitely not walnut. Yeah, and I apologize, but one of these days I'm going to remember what it is. This is a piece of Osage, and I just about finished this, and you'll see a little hairline crack across there that showed up just before I got it done. So I didn't finish it up to sell it or give it to anybody. But this is a size that a lot of the ladies seem to like. Sometimes people will wear 2 of them at a time, different colors or different sizes and shapes. But this width and this shape seems to be pretty popular. And I make some of them sometimes that are inch wide or maybe just barely over an inch, but that's about as wide as probably most ladies find comfortable to wear. So that size is pretty good. And I've played with a lot of different designs, shapes, little detailing like I did on that one.
What's the most What's the accepted diameter for your wrist?
Yeah, I was just gonna talk about that, is, a lot of women can wear a 2 5/8 ID. And I've done 2 1/4 inch ID for some little girls, some, 3, 5-year-olds. And I've done some 2 3/4 and maybe just a few 2 7/8 ID, but it's good to get them when you're wearing them to just be able to slip them on, because they're obviously going to be bigger than the biggest part of your hand, so they're a little loose. And if I have seen a couple ladies that had real small hands that could actually put them all the way up above their elbow. But I need to make you a little smaller, and that's not going to work.
There might be a glove sizing chart that might be relatable to what you're looking at.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I mean, maybe, but
Well, fashion gloves for women.
You can start at 2 5/8 ID and then kind of adjust from there. That's kind of what I've found, and I try to keep several around, and let the ladies try them on. And if it's a little bigger, a little smaller, whatever, if it's a little too tight, it's pretty easy to make the adjustments. And so that's kind of where I start with the 2 5/8.
Do you Forstner for that?
No, I'll show you here in a second how I haul these out, and I've got a John Jordan hollowing tool with a little carbide tip on it, which is kind of an overkill, but it's just quick and easy and does a really nice job. But I usually just kind of hollow it out for doing one at a time, and obviously no deeper than you're going. You can use a gouge, you can use a scraper, you can use any number of things, whatever you might have. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of special tools to do this. If you've got a parting tool and a couple gouges and something to hollow it with a little bit, you're good to go. So, any other questions at this point? So,
when you say ID, does that mean?
Inside diameter.
Inside diameter.
Yeah.
I'm guessing what you're showing us is basically an oversized napkin ring too, right?
Mm.
Yeah, you could make, if you wanted to make a set of napkin rings, you could use this same techniques for sure. And what I'll show you is kind of what I've figured out over the months and years, and it works pretty well, but I'm sure with all the brains in here, somebody can figure out a little better ways to do it. Let's see, I think I went ahead, I had made a bangle off of this piece that's going around yesterday. But in just lieu of saving some time, I thought I'd just start back with this, because I think everybody knows how to put it on the lathe and true it up and do that type of thing. But what I typically would do, I would take a piece and just chuck it in with my drive center and a point like this, true it up, turn 2 1/4, 10 or whatever size you need, and then you're ready to mount it like this and start making the bangle. So this one, this part, probably not gonna need this. That was left over from yesterday, so we'll just trim that off and true it up. And I usually start I'll use my vernier calipers and I'll set it just a little, on this a little over 2 5/8. And I'll mark my diameter, and if anybody that's done this, the sharp points will draw you a little line, but if you're marking it, if you're using this as your point, make sure that the other side doesn't touch at the same time, or it'll kick this thing back in your face. So there's my mark I need to hollow to. And again, this is definitely an overkill for this, but it works nicely, so. So I've got my ID roughed out. Let's see. That's good, just a wee bit deeper there.
What's your goal on width now for the inside?
This one, oh, for this piece,
Yeah. For
the ID,
Yeah.
I'm
No,
gonna,
2 5/8, but how deep?
oh, how wide am I gonna
Yeah.
make it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna make this one about 5/8 or so.
As these are that we were passing around?
Those are 2 1/2, or 2 1/4.
Yeah, these are all about 2 5/8 ID. I can check a couple of them. But I'm gonna make this one maybe just a little bit narrower than this one. And you wanna go a little deeper, obviously, than what your finished width is. But like I said a while ago, I found that it gets a little uncomfortable if you make them any wider than about 1 inch. You might could go 1 1/8 inches, but once they get that wide, they seem like most of the people that I've worked with like the a little bit narrow ones, the 3/4 to 5/8, 3/4, that range. So. Now, once we get to this point, let's see. One thing that's, get this out of the way so I don't keep kicking it. One of the things that's important is, especially if you got a little wider one, is you want this ID to be uniform all the way through. You don't want it to be, 16th or an 1/8 inch difference from one end to the other. So I'll get to this point and I'll try to true up that inside. And what I've found that works pretty well for me I use a little small bowl gouge. Spindle gouge would probably work too. And I'll line up my flute and try to get it to run as parallel with my diameter as I can. And some ID calipers will get us on track here, hopefully. And I'm a little tight as I go. Still just a little tight. That feels pretty good. So we've got our OD established, we've got our ID established. So how wide do I want to make this? Well, I've got a little over 3/4 there, so let's mark this.
So how thick are they normally?
Pardon?
How thick are they normally?
Kind of depends on the shape, but some of the wider ones I'll make a larger radius. It's, you know, and then like this one I had a more of a round, but 1/4 to 3/8 typically.
Do you ever round the bottom or just keep it straight and parallel?
The inside? No, I try to keep it just as, I mean, when I sand this, I'll knock the corners off just a little bit so that it, you know, you don't have a sharp edge to catch, but I usually keep that just flat across on the ID there, yeah. Okay, at this point, another thing that I have learned is I try to cut my groove here as close as I dare to the inside diameter. Because when I profile this, I try to get 95% of my profile done, bringing it down to this edge. And as close as I can, I want to also bring it down to this inside edge so that my profile is as uniform as I can get it to start with. And that, once I cut this off and turn it around, finish off the other side, I have as close as I can to having that complete profile. So the way I figured out to do this is using my calipers. And I try to get this within about 3/16. If I'm feeling real brave, I might cut it. Just, it's kind of one of those things that, ooh, one more cut, I can do this. and you cut it through, and then you're starting all over again. So if you can get it, I've got these calipers that Eric and I were talking about earlier. What's the name?
Martel.
Yeah, these are made in Canada, and they're a little pricey, but I tell you what, this is the handiest set of calipers that I have in my shop. These things are wonderful. And because they're thin enough here that I can get in this little small groove, and I can see here just exactly what wall thickness I've got left there. And I'm probably right at 3/16 with that, or 3/32 with that. So for the moment, I'm gonna leave it be. Actually, I do clean that up just a little bit. They're not very much better. This one I'm just going to keep a simple shape, but I've done, this is where you can get really creative. I've done some that kind of had a little radius or a little bead on each side with a bigger radius, a bigger bead in the middle of it. It's just, you can get creative, and I've done some like that where I've got the flats on either side, and instead of maybe making a single burn with the piano wire, I'll do a double, have double lines. I mean, you can just get creative and have fun and do all kinds of.
If you wanted to put a channel in the middle of it, could you use a round metal file to do that?
Oh, to kind of have come up and then a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do probably a little round rasp or something. You could do that, or you could cut it out with a gouge.
A coarse metal file might be the right, fineness, whatever.
For a cove.
Yeah, you could
put a cove in the middle of it.
Of course, yeah, you can cut a cove with your, with your
In that way, you're
gouge or-
getting both sides at the same time.
Yeah, you could use your skew to cut V grooves. I mean, it's.
Sure, whatever you got.
Your imagination is
Look out there.
limit there.
So Drew, you're selling these at a store in Boone. You know what's the retail price they're putting on those?
The narrow ones, real simple narrow ones, use $17, $18. If I've got spalted wood, they're beautiful, and you can use spalted wood or ambrosia maple or something like that. If I've got a nice piece of wood, $28, $30 on the biggest ones with the real pretty pieces of wood, and people in general don't seem to bat an eyelid at those prices. But yeah, a lot of them $20, $22. That kind of depends on how pretty I think it is.
Yeah. Most of the profile of the ring stays the same, but the coloring makes a difference in the pricing.
Or the type of wood it is,
Yeah, grain and color,
the
yeah.
quality of it, yeah. If you've got something that's maybe got a little burl or real interesting grain, or spalting or something like that, and
Yeah.
I'll bump the price up a
Good
little
job.
bit.
Drew, you mentioned using a guitar string. Can you just kind of describe how you do that? Do you hold it on each end, and at what stage do you do that? You know, do you sand it and then do it, or?
I would sand it some first, and a lot of times I'll take my skew chisel and make a tiny little groove so I know to define. So, because you know when you start, sometimes I've got a couple different diameter guitar strings that I've made little wooden handles on the end, so I can really get some pressure on it. And like the one with the flat, I turned that and sanded it, and then cut a couple little grooves there, and then kind of the last thing, I burned it. And actually, when I did that, I put a coat of sand and sealer on it, and then I went back and kind of burned it just a little bit again to make a good, sharp, clean little burn line there. And then shot it with a coat of lacquer, a couple coats of lacquer. And that's another thing we were talking earlier. I did a lot of these when I first started with tung oil, and I love a tung oil finish, but it takes a couple of 3, sometimes 4 steps to get a little bit of sheen and build. So I was trying to make a little money on these, so I finally said the heck with that. So I started using the sand and sealer, and then shoot it in a coat of lacquer or a couple coats of lacquer on it. Then you can buff them up in half a minute, and I hadn't heard anybody complaining about a little bit of sheen on them, so that's what I've been doing most recently. And I do 90% of that on the lathe. I mean, while I'll sand this right now, and I didn't bring any of the sealer with me in the finish, but I'll sand this up and get this nice and slick and smooth inside and out. And then I'll put a coat of sand and sealer, and in this kind of weather, it dry in 15 minutes. I can sand it right quick again, and another coat of sealer if I want to, depending on the grain of the wood. Or I'll slow the lathe down to about 25 RPMs, and I'll shoot a quick coat of lacquer on it. And like we were talking about earlier, that stuff dries so quick, especially in this weather. You know, I can recoat it again in 15, 20 minutes. So I'll be doing something else in the meantime. I might rough out another piece or whatever while that's drying. But I'll try to do all that I can at that point on the lathe to save you some time. And so,
Would you explain what sanding sealer, what the point of that is?
It's shellac, right?
I like to use the shellac sanding sealer. There's lacquer sanding sealers, but it just helps to seal the wood grain, especially when you have a real ring porous wood, real open porous wood like this. It'll help seal all that grain. So when I shoot a coat of lacquer on top of it, it'll build more quickly without soaking into the pores. And I use it a lot on my finishes. I've even used it some even with a tung oil finish. I'll put a thin coat and kind of seal the bottom of those pores. Because those pores, like we were talking earlier, they're like straws in the wood, and they're particularly like red oak. I mean, you can blow air through, and so anything you can do to seal those as quickly as you can, so that you can build a finish more easily, then it's a good thing to do. So I use sand and sealer a lot in my finishing steps.
There's just one thought on sanding sealer. If you're using lacquer, Deft makes a brush-on sanding sealer that is really thick. And you can brush it on and put a tremendous build coat on your first coat.
In one coat.
And just one coat. It's really, really thick. And it's lacquer, so every successive coat after that just bonds right into that. So whatever the finish is from the sanding sealer, whatever finish you opt to put on it, that's what it's going to be. But if you want to move the process along, the brush-on sanding sealer is really thick.
What brand was that you said?
The brand I use is Deft
Deft.
sanding sealer. I think most of the lacquer people make, well, like Mohawk, they have a spray version of it. But if you want to really load it up, you can get a very, very dense coat on quickly, just by brushing it on.
Where do you find Deft?
Last time I bought, I think, maybe Home Depot or Lowe's or something. And just to get tangential for one moment, we were talking about epoxy, filling it, staining it. I use 30-minute epoxy, not 5-minute epoxy. And the reason I do is it percolates into the wood a lot better. And if there's any air bubbles in it, it takes so long to dry, the bubbles will come out a lot easier out of the slow cure than it will a fast cure.
Got more open time for those
So
bubbles.
I'm not really, when I'm using that epoxy, I'm not really in a big rush at that point. So I always use the 30-minute epoxy, and it's just something to experiment with, but the end result has always been better for me when I use that in terms of penetration and settling and everything about it's better.
Yeah. But if you haven't been using sand and sealer on your finishes, it's a quick, easy step, and it'll really help improve and smooth out give you a better finished product. And it's, you buy a quart of it, and I actually thin mine down a little bit, and it'll last for a year or two, yeah. So it goes a long way. And
Have you ever used the texturing tool for the outside?
no, I haven't, but
Texturing.
yeah, but that could be interesting too. And I've done most all mine just with clear finishes, but like we were talking earlier, you could dye these things or stain them, and I mean, just how you can decorate them, it's just wide open, and just use your imagination. But yeah, if you want to do some red ones and green ones for Christmas, or whatever, you could get light maple or ash and make all kinds of pretty colors. So that's an option too. So let me sand this one just a little bit here a minute at a little slower speed.
So when you're out at flea markets, if you happen to see a mannequin arm, that would be a good display option for this.
Ooh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're a little bit bigger.
Halloween though, a skeleton.
Now we're getting creative.
You wouldn't be thinking of these smaller ideas.
So when you finish and you carve it off, do you just hand sand the inner edge?
Inside or outside.
I'll show you
Okay.
how to do that here in a minute.
I'm impatient.
You could probably just hand sand it, but I use a jam chuck. Cut this off, turn it around, use a jam chuck. I'm kind of lazy. I like to do stuff as fast
Well,
as I
speaking of
can.
laser, I mean, the whole time I've been thinking about, you got a 2 5/8 Forstner, you ream it out in, 15, 20 seconds, and then you can finish it with, if you made a little router jig, you could do a round off internally on both ends and have it match. But at that point, you're barely turning anyway, so what's the point?
Well, if you want to get the production mode, because I don't know what a 2 5/8 Forster bit would cost, but
But you can get one of the Chinese carbide ones for about $15.
I might have to look into that. That would definitely save some more time.
We did a bunch of the napkin rings earlier and we just like pulled them out.
You did what? Oh, you bored them?
What would
Yeah.
that be used for, like a door-knob hole?
Probably.
Yeah.
Or just basically this,
Yeah.
or for vases and other things where it'd just be helpful to remove a lot of material that'll lose pretty quickly.
Drew, $20 will get you in the pan with a Forster bit.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Well, that'd be worth a try then.
That's what I do.
Yeah, a couple months ago,
I'd make
someone,
3 or 4 rings potentially,
Yeah.
and bore that deep, and then cut them off.
I think, were you showing the carbide wing tips? I mean, I got a couple and they're great. Really fast, really thin shavings, yeah. Good for compost.
I knew somebody here would help tell me how to speed this process up. Okay, I think that's plenty good.
What's paper you turning that red?
So that's just a wee bit thicker than I like to end up on the inside, but that's
I wanna see how you finish that rough cut now. The one you just
Okay.
cut off. He has a
yeah. I've just made a rude jam chuck, and
There you go.
that one is
Slick.
big, but what I've learned to do is make adjustments with either a little piece of paper or a little piece of leather or whatever, depending on, and sometimes I'll actually re-taper this a little bit as well. And this doesn't have to be perfect to do this. But you can true that up pretty slick like that. Let's see. Should have done a little better job organizing my sandpaper grids here. Here's what I need.
So you wouldn't use your gouge anymore on that? Just
Yeah, I mean, if you made a really light cut there, you could do it, but in lieu of it popping off and
That's just 60 grits for it.
yeah.
60 grit.
Yeah, well, that's why I try to make that cut 30 seconds or less so that I have very little work left to do when I get to this point. I could probably very lightly touch that with a gouge and save myself a few seconds.
Or not.
That's a little fast.
I'm just curious, have any of your customers or anybody else's who make these had any complaints about allergies?
No.
Does the sealer take care of any actual wood contact then?
Yeah, the seal and the lacquer probably would, yeah. And I don't use exotic woods. I just like turning, we have so many beautiful hardwoods here in this area that and so many of those exotics, you do have allergy issues, all kinds of stuff in them. So I just don't usually mess with them, but I'm sure, yeah, with a sealer and a couple coats of lacquer would probably
Thank you.
harden off seal off any
Okay.
issues there. But just very quickly, with no finish, I don't know how long, I didn't time how, of course it would take a few more minutes to rough that out. But sometimes like I say, I will reshape this a little bit, or sometimes if it's really close, even a layer of paper on there works. Sometimes the bigger ones, I've had to use maybe a couple layers of leather or something, but whatever it takes to solve the problem for the moment. But that's basically the process.